Terrific. Well, welcome everybody. We particularly want to welcome our the congressional staff who traveled from Washington, D.C. last night. We greatly appreciate you being here. We encourage you to check out the website since the Webby folks are here, and we want a Webby for this website. It's areweinYourState.org, and it goes through, it's a heat map of the United States, and it overlays the colleges and universities that teach video game design with the 3,000 video game companies in the United States. So you can go into a state or in a congressional district and see where the video game industry is alive and well, and where these creative clusters are forming. We have a lot of different people from a lot of backgrounds. We ask each of you to please join in the conversation. Think through what you're hearing today through the prism of your organization and potential partnerships. We have given birth in this forum to a number of things: Glass Lab, the National STEM Video Game Challenge, and a whole range of other initiatives. So we're thrilled to hear about that. Kevin, I'll hand it to you to take us through our first panel. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you to our panelists for joining us today. So everybody knows that video games are an entertainment format, and they're a growing entertainment format. The games and experiences that you'll see over the course of the day on the show floor really demonstrate that video games are art, and you'll see kind of the intersection of art and entertainment. But what a lot of people don't realize is that games can go immensely far beyond just an entertainment product. So the folks that we have up here today represent, as Constance was saying, education, we have impact, and health. And games can be impactful across various sectors of life. And this is a topic about which I'm personally very passionate. We also have the Entertainment Software Foundation that does a lot of work in this space as well. But I'm fortunate in this case that I'm joined by folks who are a lot smarter on this issue than I am. If each of you would just give kind of a 2 to 3 minute introduction about yourself, who you are, who you're with, you will do a much better job than I will. So Constance, I know you just spoke, but...
Hi, I'm back. Let's go again. I'm also at UC Irvine, and I study games and learning historically, and I'm just getting my toe into esports thanks to Mark Deppy and our arena.
Hi, I'm Susana Pollack. I'm president of Games for Change. We're a 14-year-old not-for-profit whose mission is to empower social innovators and game developers to use digital games to drive impact. Our community is a very interesting cross-discipline and public and private community of not only great game developers who are making content that are impacting health and social and civic issues and learning, but also NGOs and foundations and government agencies who are tapping into this powerful medium. And we act as a convener, bringing all these people together to help foster partnerships and collaboration. We also work with youth, not with higher education at the moment, working public and middle school students, introducing them into game design with a civic impact focus. We're actually going to be launching a student challenge in Los Angeles with the support of Annenberg Tech, where we are allowing kids to learn how to make games, connect social issues like climate change, like immigrant issues, immigrant stories, and designing games that actually can have impact.
Hi, I'm Jessica Lindl. My background is in games and learning. I had the honor of working with Eric and the ESA team and Craig, who introduced himself at EA, on the creation of Glass Lab. And I'm now the global head of education at Unity Technologies. Do we want to pause and have other people introduce, or should we just keep going through?
Adam,
okay.
and then we'll have the folks introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Adam Gazzaley. I'm a professor in neurology and psychiatry at University of California, San Francisco. I'm also the co-founder of a company called the Kili Interactive Labs. We design and develop video games from scratch, working with professionals in the industry as well as our own team for impact on brain function. As a neuroscientist and a neurologist, we recognize there's a big deficit in how we treat numerous conditions, pretty much all the conditions of the mind and the brain, and we think that the experiences that can be delivered through targeted adaptive video games could have an impact in that domain. So we build our games, and then we do very deep dive research studies with functional brain imaging to understand how video games can have a meaningful and sustainable impact on how brains function.
Some new folks joined. Do we want to just please introduce yourself for the benefit of everybody?
Sure. Oh, sorry. I'm John Van Willis. I'm a student trying to learn a little bit more about VR and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it.
I'm Danny, and I make mobile video games.
I'm Gemma. I'm here with Discover Labs. We're an education and VR company.
I think some folks.
John Watts from the Atlantic Council in DC. We're doing some gaming for resilience and other kind of ways of engaging people in sort of more intellectual pursuits rather than just writing old boring reports.
Alex Paul, also from the Atlantic Council.
Eric?
Eric Martin, former White House Office of Science and Tech Policy, curating VR for Change at Games for Change, and soon joining Unity.
Okay. Well, part of what we do is matchmaking, so there will be a break. So everybody feel free to mingle and exchange some business cards. Back to the panel.
All right, so I want to start, we have folks from kind of all levels of background on video games at this point, so I want to start with a softball for you. When you're talking about games for impact, for health, for education, what do these games look like? What's the type of experience the users have? Are we talking about a large cinematic experience like the AAA titles you see advertised, or are we talking something that's more inherently targeted to the demographic that you need to reach?
From a high level perspective, from a high level view, I think the answer is it really is about the audience you're looking to reach and the outcome you're looking to achieve. So when we work with non-game designers about a game that they want to develop to achieve a certain goal, we immediately have a conversation about the outcome that you're interested in achieving and the audience that you're looking to reach. So the outcome could be transfer of knowledge and education. That'll direct you in one path. The outcome could be about building awareness around a social issue. And the audience that you might want to reach might be a student in middle school, or the audience might be a casual gamer who's playing this on your mobile phone. So the answer really is that I think there are numerous ways to approach what kind of game you're going to design for which audience, and looking at the outcome is going to have a huge impact.
Well, I can tell you our game development pathway has two main focuses. The first is to create game mechanics that target brain functions we're trying to improve. So for example, we have a meditation-inspired video game, a rhythm video game to build up anticipation and timing processes in the brain. So we start with our neuroscientific foundation of what we want to build, and then we work just like most people in the industry do. How do you create immersive, engaging experiences for those populations that we're targeting? Sometimes it's mobile games. We do a lot in VR now and motion capture. So we really bring together scientists and game development professionals to create something that I think is quite unique. On the surface, it would look like any video game that was built for entertainment purposes, but it's what's under the hood that we spend often a couple of years developing and then testing in a very detailed way to figure out, does it do what we hope it will do?
And then I think just adding to that, we had the privilege at Glass Lab of taking incredible IP like SimCity and Plants vs. Zombies that was seen as just pure entertainment, and being able to take the data and analytics that come off of that gameplay to prove that critical thinking and problem-solving skills were actually better built by those games than by traditional methodologies like textbooks and traditional classroom instruction. So I think the answer is all of the above.
I love that segue. My next question here was going to be, what's the relationship between some of these games and commercial games? So can you use commercial games to achieve similar outcomes? What success have you seen with commercial games for this purpose?
I really cut my teeth studying commercial games exclusively and looking at, at the time this was, early 2000s, and there was a lot of trepidation around kids and screen time and games, and are they antisocial, are they this or that? But when you looked at the amount of time they were spending on games, it's actually far greater than the time they spend on homework. So I had, a lot of my first decade of research was really looking at what's the intellectual life of games? What are kids doing? And of course, it turns out, no surprise for any of you here, because I presume if you're here, you actually have played a game before, that it requires, depending on the game, but it can be quite demanding in terms of cognitive skills, problem solving, literacy, etc. So I would say that there is absolutely no difference in terms of level of impact. It depends on, sort of the framework that it's placed in, right? I mean, I personally play a lot of Minecraft because I have young children. So I can get on Minecraft and do very stupid things, or I can get on Minecraft and do beautiful work as well. And it may not necessarily always be obvious which is beautiful and productive and which one is button mashing. I mean, for example, my pranks are actually beautiful and wonderful when I blow stuff up. That's the best part. But just saying that I think commercial games have a tremendous amount of impact as well. We found in our labs that there's something around the context of gaming that having a community of people that actually ask you questions about why, or have students, especially young people, talking and reflecting seems to be one of the special tricks about how to make games impactful. So I guess I'll hand it over to others who have worked with commercial games.
Nothing to add.
I can just tell you that our inspiration is from the work in commercial games. The data that shows that games like first-person shooter video games can have a positive impact on cognitive abilities. There are many, many studies that have shown that. And so we were inspired by that and then asked the question, if we built a game from scratch using design principles that we could glean from existing games, but built them targeted to really have this impact and then don't abandon the entertainment aspects, still focus on art, music, story, reward, which are part of all great games, and you put that together from the beginning, can we build something that's even more impactful? But the consumer game world is what inspired us to do this in the first place.
I do have something to add, actually. I take that back. So I think just from the opportunity for those of you who are designing and developing today, I think there's been a significant change powered by Unity and other engines that you can create this incredibly high quality game with a small team and smaller resources compared to the larger game companies, which I think is a big breakthrough when it comes to the impact side of games and learning.
I'll echo that as a user. All of our development is done in Unity, and I think that we might not have been able to do what we now do without having sort of the democratization of game development take place, where you don't need to have just a giant high-powered studio, but you can have an artist and a programmer working together and really create something amazing. So that's been an entire game changer, so to speak, I would say.
So Jessica, you're only 6 weeks on the job at Unity, so I apologize for this question. But really to that end, what is driving Unity to kind of reach the educational goals that they are? Why does Unity, as a private company, have this commitment to getting so many new users? Obviously, there's a commercial aspect to it, but what's the driving force behind it?
Sure, absolutely. So although I'm only 6 weeks into this role, I also have been a long-time Unity user and have stayed close to the company for the last 5 years. Just to take a step back, the goals that we have at Unity, building on Adam's democratization comment, are really enabling everybody globally, and I want to emphasize globally, to become a creator. So ensuring that the tools can be used by not just game developers, but artists, and moving into non-programmers as well, is strategically where we're heading to unlock that creative opportunity for all types of learners globally. The second goal that we have is really looking at how do we democratize opportunity. So my own career path, moving from Glass Lab and then moving into the job skill area, by way of realizing, working in this industry, that the game industry is quite unique. It doesn't demand, coming from Silicon Valley, it doesn't demand like the HBS undergrad or the HBS degree and the Stanford undergrad. It really does unlock opportunity for anybody who wants to work hard and become a creator. And that for me was really inspiring as I was working in the game industry and then started moving into job skill preparation. And so from the alignment with my own focus on impact and Unity's, that we do have a desire to really unlock that opportunity for all creators as well. So it's not just creating for a hobby, it's creating for a career path. And if you go on Unity, you'll see the Unity Connect area of our site, which is essentially a talent marketplace for all types of developers and artists and creators globally, really leading with their portfolio of work and having sort of the education and pedigree be behind the scenes. And that for me and for Unity was incredibly important, because I think without unlocking globally all types of creators to have opportunity, the quality of the games and the quality of the impact is not going to be at the level that it should be at. So looking at how we are defining not just creating for all, but opportunity for all is a real strategy and direction for us. The part around why are we doing this, to be clear, it's not, we are for profit and it's not totally benevolent, is that every time a developer or creator is using Unity and publishing on Unity, anytime you're downloading a game on your phone or iPad or your console, you're downloading the Unity software. And so we're serving analytics and ads on that platform and monetizing it. So really from a business perspective, it's the opportunity to be able to monetize the over 2.5 billion devices that currently are running Unity.
So I'm going to piggyback off that, and Adam, I was looking at the work that your lab is doing on specialty input devices, and again, trying to democratize access here. So can you speak a little bit to the research that you're doing and trying to make sure that all users are able to interact with your technologies?
Yeah, so it's an incredible opportunity, as everyone obviously appreciates, to get what might be in the near future viewed as a new type of medicine. I could talk about that more, but also an educational tool. And we actually almost don't distinguish between them so much anymore. Whether you're trying to improve a brain that has deficits that we think has a disease or neurological psychiatric condition, or healthy minds that are just developing at any age, what we think of as education or wellness. We see the potential for game technology to improve function across all those populations, including the elite side, like athletes and military and other, executives and professionals. So that, which was not part of our initial vision, but it's part of our mission right now, has been an incredible transition to not realize that we're focusing on just, children with autism. Not that that's not a worthy goal in itself, but that it could be generalized. What we learn in that population applies to all school children. And then, of course, mobile technology is impossible to ignore as a focus because it's just ubiquitous. We can't get teachers or doctors into many places in this world, but very soon everyone will have a mobile device and internet connectivity. So that opportunity is amazing. We have projects right now in India with young people who are engaging in our meditation training apps to try to improve their attention ability. We think it's an incredible means of addressing disparity issues. School children that can't get to school every day but have a phone or a tablet and can play something that helps improve their thinking. So that is an irresistibly attractive domain of the accessibility of technology. So essentially writing off of the consumer world and the innovation that's just explosive, as we all know, and leveraging that and saying, okay, we're going to use all this amazing hardware, software, brilliant minds that are creating this. Most of it, as we know, is targeted to entertainment, communication, and media, and say, how about if we reinvent this and then validate these as tools to help improve our minds? So that opportunity and its sort of pervasiveness is exciting.
So Susana, as a convener here, for kind of the games that you work with, what have you learned about achieving scale and higher production value to try and get some of these games to market? What are the barriers?
So we discuss a lot of those challenges at the Games for Change Festival that we run every year, and particularly in the games and learning side, I think the challenge of getting games into the classroom and distribution into the K-12 market is one that is a huge opportunity, but needs to have buy-in on the administrator side and the school district side. And I think that is part of our challenge, is to educate the buyers, really, of these products for use in the classroom, right? These great products are being made. The distribution methods are challenged. But also, there's also the challenge of raising the bar of those games so that they can be competitive with a commercial game, just for the virtue of getting kids' attention, right? And they're seeing a lot more players coming into the space that are excited to explore, whether it's companies like Ubisoft with Assassin's Creed. I mean, we spoke with this at the festival last year, how there were teachers around the country who are creating mods of Assassin's Creed because they've got a generation of youth getting excited about world history, and they want to use that in the classroom. And so conversations with with studios talking about the commercial, games industry, but how to participate in that space. Last year, it was announced that Civilization is being turned into an EDU project with Glass Lab, and I think there's more engagement we can about the opportunity of these games that are being made with such integrity and such research that they are that they, as a byproduct, are actually teaching kids and getting youth excited about issues without actually realizing that they're learning. So I think that that is part of our goal, is to excite the commercial game developers to move into this space, whether as part of their corporate strategy or engaging with smaller developers who have the research and the academic backgrounds to help build these games and marrying them with the talent.
I would just add too that right now, in the last several years, we've sort of entered this what I would call the golden age of games, where there's not just an indie, not just fantastic AAA companies, but mid-sized companies and small indie shops, and they're producing games that I would ostensibly call games for impact, because they have some form of point of view or some sort of goal beyond just high score, and they're a natural part of the indie market. So part of what we're seeing, is not just this philanthropic effort, but sort of the, as I said, sort of taking games for impact, or thinking about games that might actually do great things for people or communicate great ideas, right, of whatever version you say, but creating a market in which designers generally are interested, and players, not just mothers buying for their kids, but players download those games and play them as a natural part of their gameplay. And I think that's really exciting, that a market went from blue ocean to now there is a market that will purchase those games and not think twice about the fact that it's Spell Tower or really bad chess, right? So I think that's great.
Yeah, I think also from the consumer market, the introduction of Steam has also democratized the distribution methods for those indie and the mid-sized developers. And so you'll find projects like Paper Please, which is made by an independent developer, breaking through and becoming a major hit. And it's a game that's basically about immigration control and putting you into the perspective of what it'd be like to make those decisions that are life and death for immigrants and people to process to come through into countries. So I think that has had a big impact.
And so that's a good example. What are other kind of examples here for people who actually want to go and look up some of these games for impact for health? What are some of the good accessible titles that you would not necessarily recommend, but what are some of the games in this ecosystem right now?
Sure, I'll
Should we all give our best?
Yeah.
I would like to hear your best guess on this one, actually.
Yeah.
Best game, do you want to go?
Well, for health games, I'm pretty picky because we develop them, and I think that it's hard for me to comment generally. I can tell you games that have inspired me to build the type of cognitive games that we create. I'd say the top of my list is Portal 2, as a game that sort of transformed how I thought about consumer games and became something that is sort of like a goal in the future to create something of such depth and also fun. So I'll throw that out.
I'm going to add in not a game, but a VR experience that I think is really compelling for education. If you guys aren't familiar with Lifelike, and not a K, but a Q, in really understanding science. If you see their implementation, there's a hardware challenge, obviously, from a middle school and high school perspective on VR, but when you see the implementation, the one kid in the classroom with the one pair of goggles has them on, but the whole class is watching the learning experience and really transfixed by it. And I just think that's a really compelling new approach.
I look at games like this all the time, and it's so hard for me to pick my favorite. But something that in the impact space that I think has struck me for a variety of reasons is 1979 Revolution, which was made by an indie, but a mid-sized indie named Ink Stories. Naveed Kansari came out of Rockstar, and he was a director of Grand Theft Auto, and he brought with him a very cinematic style to create a first-person shooter game, but also a narrative-based game about what it's like to have lived through the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s. And for me, it's not only exciting, it's tense as all hell to play, but you are immersed in a culture and experience that you wouldn't have access to. And I love the fact that that they invested so much into the game. It looks gorgeous, and it has that impact.
You're up.
Adam, I think your game is fantastic. I cannot wait to see what they do with Civ, the educational version, as a Civ fanatic. Papers, Please, I just finished last weekend, and all I can say is that it's horribly hard, horribly cruel, and I couldn't stop playing it, which really irritates me. I'm like, it's so bad, restart. It's so bad, restart. As far as games for impact, it's hard for me to draw a line around them. I think that there are so many really interesting titles out there that now I sort of feel are this interesting space between impact and art pieces. Like Oxenfree is another one I just was looking at from sort of a social emotional learning perspective. So I think it depends on the frame that you use, but there really is this booming market out there. And I have to say that the democratization of both development platforms like Unity and distribution channels have really changed who can get in this game. I mean, when we first started, it was like these little prototypes. They didn't look anything like Atom stuff, right? They're like these little prototypes of an idea that you begged someone to fund to the next hurdle of development, and then if you weren't careful, they died. And now I think that that ecosystem is actually starting to sort of get beyond some of its earlier barriers and frictions into something where you see games out there. If you haven't played really bad chess and you want to understand chess, play really bad chess. It's just a great game.
I would also recommend, if you're looking for a good one, This War of Mine. It's a great way to go. Same as Constance was saying, it's one where you don't want to continue playing it. It's war from the perspective of civilians and the decisions that civilians have to make during wartime. It's incredibly depressing, but it's a fantastic game about resource usage. Again, I mean, it's the games that you play. So the last question, then we'll turn it over for any audience questions here. So what's preventing some of these games from becoming large commercial successes, and looking at it through, especially from a policy lens? What are things that we can be doing from a policy perspective to help make these games easier to access, or kind of help encourage the marketplace to grow?
Like built for you.
Right, I'm like, please let me speak to this issue. So I worked on those policy issues with Mark DeLaura, who's sitting in the back, with Eric Martin, who's sitting up front, like trying to think about how to take games, how to help agencies and sort of national entities, both foundation, private, and government agencies, understand that interactive media, games, are this really potent medium to use, and that in fact they have really great ability to scale, to meet new markets, and not just young markets either, right? I mean, again, you're talking about designing a first-person experience. It's still to this day, after there's this hang-up around the word games, so I refuse to stop using the word games because we need to get over that hang-up, especially at the national level. But when I first started in OSTP, there was, maybe, I think our first meeting of PIs was like about maybe 70, 75 PIs that were funding games, and then it was all the way up well past 200 by the time I left in 2012. The number of program officers interested in using games as a means to accomplish their agency's goals, for example, bringing in a new audience to national park system, or reducing childhood obesity, or creating new scientific developments in cancer. All of those, like, it had really sort of blossomed into where if you called it interactive media, you could get some leverage. So I feel like that has really shifted now that the gamer generation has grown up and is now starting to make decisions, frankly, and understands games are not this strange black box. I do think, though, that there are these still, sort of ecosystem issues that no one funder is necessarily interested in solving, which I think is really unfortunate. In my experience with both private and public, especially private, they tend to really like funding a game that, they want a game that they can put their name on and say, that was our game, that was our thing. And I get the instinct, and it's, it's a worthwhile strategy. But there are also ways in which you can get so much bigger of an ROI by trying to think about pipeline issues. Do you remember the conversations we had at Glass Lab? Trying to think about how can you take, for example, I work on the higher ed side. There is a tremendous amount of IP that is sitting on shelves that we have created a prototype. We've tested it in labs. We can show that it actually does great things for people, and it goes nowhere. It goes nowhere because no federal agency or foundation wants to pick it up and take it to the next hurdle. No one wants to help you put the marketing behind it to get it in the hands of people. So you link it out on the iTunes store and you're like, yay, success, and it's down at the bottom of millions of titles. So there are these sort of unsexy but really good problems that would not take a lot of effort to solve if we would simply have the will of solving them collectively. So I'm going to put my bid in for that.
I just have two add-ons to Constance's comments. One is, I feel like we have solved the development and design aspect of getting all of the quality up to the level of AAA games. What we haven't solved is the discovery side of it, and so I think that's a big unanswered question. I'm not sure if policy can help with that, but any help you can get would be great. The second, and this is just drawing from my experience, which is primarily from an institution perspective into K-12, is I'm just over systems. Like if we are trying to monetize and build a sustainable model based on a system, for example, selling into the K-12 system or the healthcare system, it's like game over. Don't even start. And I think that has been the challenge as we've thought about all of these different industries and the IP that's being created, is that the pipeline can't go into the system. It can go into a teacher, it can go into corporations who want to fund schools, but it can't, in my view, be sustainable and highly a high growth opportunity if it's going into the system directly.
I'll give you my perspective. It's sort of a little different, and it comes from my background as a neurologist and someone that, and a field that when we see a problem, we tend to think about one solution, and that solution usually are drugs, right? Small molecules, pharmaceuticals. And it's really frustrating because we don't have great drugs for the mind, for attention, depression, memory, anxiety. And so we have a hurdle in that physicians tend to think about medicine in a very particular way, and everything else is alternative and sits on the sides and doesn't get prescribed, doesn't get reimbursed. It's just out there, and that's unfortunate, and it's a big loss. So that's a hurdle that I recognize. And it's a policy issue, and that's because there are regulatory agencies that also sit in DC area, and they help determine what's safe and what's effective. And so we now have a pathway starting at my lab at UCSF, technology I created there, licensed by a company, Achilles, which I co-founded many years ago now, that now has a game. It's a pretty high-level game developed by folks from LucasArts and EA and lots of professionals in the industry working with our teams of scientists. And that game is now in multiple clinical trials. Autism, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, Alzheimer's disease. And now the one that's gotten the most attention is we have a phase 3 FDA trial. This is a multi-site trial, 15 different sites around the country. A phase 3 trial means it is the last phase of research that then goes on to FDA approval. So this trial is underway right now. It'll finish this year. And the target is a clinical indication of the game as a treatment for children with ADHD. So if it's successful, by the end of this year, it'll be the first non-drug treatment for ADHD and the first prescribable video game ever. So it's an exciting time. We'll see what happens. It's the jury, the research study is still going on. Thank you. And then, there are other big hurdles. Who's going to pay for this game? Will insurance providers pay? And will there be reimbursement? And will doctors actually reach into their pockets, pull out a prescription pad, and write 2 months of iPad game, see me, and we'll collect the data along the way? I believe that is the future that we will have in the next 3 years. The FDA essentially views this as a new category of medicine. So we currently have molecular medicine, which is almost everything we do. This would be like a form of digital medicine, an experiential treatment as opposed to a molecular treatment.
All right, so we've got time for just a few questions here, and then of course, if you have further questions, we're happy to put you through to the panelists afterwards. Yes?
Yeah, so Constance spoke on this, but I'm actually new to this to this field, and all I could think while you were talking is, well, why are they calling them games, and why is it entertainment? So from a policy and even communications perspective, is it just semantics, and why do we need to hold on to game, and what is the conversation around that?
Well, I'm an academic, but I hate heavy Latinates that are not necessary. I tend to not trust things that are wrapped up in language that is hard to understand. So, to me, they're games because interactive media is a mouthful we don't need. I'd be interested in how other people position toward that. I refuse to, I mean, I have a long conversation about play and our bizarre puritanical streak in the States, which would be much more suitable for a glass of wine later today, which I would love to have. But yeah, I refuse to give up the word games because it's a booming industry. It appeals to everyone who's ever touched a game, sort of gets it and knows that it's like talking about TV. Why would I stop? Why would I need to call it like something like the broadcasting living room box, right?
I'm sorry, can I clarify? Is it a policy hurdle though, because of the early comments?
Oh, no, thank you. No, we just called it interactive media. If it's going to get funds out to do projects that would actually save lives or help kids, we'll call it whatever you need. But I think that the word game to me is actually is important to stick with, I suppose. Because that's what they are, and the rest of it seems like a lot of trying to dance around issues that are more about our cultural hang-ups than much else, which is really opinionated, and I apologize. What do you guys think?
I mean, I've been deep in this discussion. I wrote my first grant to the NIH for the game Neuroracer, which eventually became a paper published in Nature. It was a great story in the end, but my first grant had video games in the title and throughout it, and my colleagues thought that was a really stupid idea, and they were right. I mean, it was a challenge. Just to put the word fun, that three-letter word, in a grant seems to somehow make it superficial to many people. To me, it's the opposite. I mean, fun is why it's a game. That part of it, that engagement, and not just the motivation and rewards, but the fun of a game, I think is critical for its positive effects in the domain that we work on, and I don't want to abandon that. And now we're fighting that battle many years later, not through the granting agency. Now I have many grants from the NIH about video games and fun, but as a company building a giant product in the healthcare industry, is video game and fun again an appropriate term? And I sit at board meetings fighting that battle again, that we don't want to abandon it. And it's true, what we've created is more than a video game in a classic sense. It has a whole ecosystem of communication with physicians and providers and all sorts of things that go on that are outside of the video game. But the video game engine is the core of what we're creating, and I fight all the time to preserve that language. I think it is what it is, and euphemizing, making a euphemism or trying to hide it, to me seems short-sighted.
All right, last question, and then as I said, we can have follow-ups afterwards.
Dwayne Carson here. I guess I have a question listening to all this, and this has been brilliant. With the advancement of technology and as malleable as minds are within the industry, is there a line between developing a leading conversation and then developing a game for impact? Within for example, you have the Assassin's Creed where you were kind of leading the conversation, whereas another nonprofit organization may have a game that is designed for their view on education, their view on what health should be, or on the social impact.
I'm not exactly sure what the question is. The question is, which is the better approach?
No. I was saying is as you are transforming minds, as they're coming up and they are having access to all these different games, is there a line, and it may not exist, where where you are getting your agenda across, as opposed to letting them have the conversation as in the community of how to proceed forward on certain issues?
If I'm understanding your question, I think it's a really deep one that can't be answered. So you can talk about games as this art form, which means that eventually, games are not linear. Players do what they want to do, and that's what makes them magical. I'm the person having the experience, getting to sit in the seat of the narrator, the main character, whatever, right? So because of that, how do I put this? So if I get to do what I want in a game because it's interactive and it's my game, and I get to interpret it in the ways I want to interpret it, which is what makes it art, then how do you make that a game for impact, right? There's this weird tension around, look, you don't make art necessarily and say, but here's the interpretation I want you to have from it. I want you to know that 2 + 2 = 4, okay? 2 + 2 and it's 4, right? So I would honestly say in a very blunt way that If my message is 2 + 2 = 4, although math actually is great for games, if my message is a declarative fact in the world, sometimes just reading a brochure is a much better way to get to it. If my path is linear, then why bother with a game investment? Game investments are really transformative when it's something where I have to understand a system of complexity, and I have to come to understand how to predict that system, how to work within that system, etc. And then there is no, at the end of the day, I want you to conclude X about this game. It's that what you're trying to get is a conversation, for example, with Civ, where history is not merely the great man story. History is actually about global distribution of material goods, right? So I think that that's one place where you see games are not the right treatment for every goal. Does that help?
No, it does. It
Okay.
does. It was speaking to what I was.
Yeah, I want to add to that the player is a huge part of the development process, the iteration and the play testing. So it's a constant conversation, right, between the developers, the researchers, the assessment experts, and the content matter experts and the developers to see to get feedback on the player's experience. So I feel like it's a collaborative process as opposed to a single direction.
All right, well, we've got to move on to the next one, but if you'd like to, we'll provide contact information. You're welcome to follow up with us, and we'll send your questions along to the panelists afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.